Hello everyone! Today I'm very excited to share a new brew of mine. It's actually not that new, but I've been playing it a lot at my LGS and with my friends and also on the 99. And I really want to share with you, it's very exciting. The deck is called Hand in Hand. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but a while back the Mind Sculptors had an interesting idea called the Iconic Deck Challenge, where you take an existing 60 card format deck and turn it into a cEDH deck. And while I've done that before for my, I don't know, commander decks, I've made a Jund deck, I've made a Tron deck. What else have I done? Anyways, I also made a landless Hogak deck once. It's not that good. But anyways, what I want to do for this iconic deck challenge is to build something that I was really interested in back when I played a standard for Ravnica and Kamigawa. It's a very unique deck called Hand in Hand. Don't know if you guys remember what this is, but let's talk about it. Going over here to the Ravnica Kamigawa standard throwback gauntlet, we can see a quick description on Hand in Hand. I'll throw a link in the description box if you want to read it. But looking over here, basically what makes this deck very cool is it's a very unique control deck. Like, I would describe it as a proactive control deck. I used to play Esper in Modern, and some people have heard of this story before, but I worked on a deck with, I forgot his name, Francesco something, for it's called Narset Transcendent, back when Esper or control decks just wasn't quite as good in Modern compared to, I don't know, playing Jund or Abzan. So when you play Esper, instead of thinking about reactively responding to your opponents of counterspells, what if you proactively controlled them with hand disruption and other things as well? So I have a lot of discard effects in Modern already, but that was kind of the idea. You can play, your Inquisition Causal, your Thought Seizes, kind of rip your opponent's hand apart, play Lingering Souls, and then you play your Narset Transcendent, and then also your Gideons. Narset, you can just start rebounding your spells, getting more value that way, ripping their hand apart, playing Lingering Souls to block for you, Liliana the Veil, all that stuff. So I would describe that as proactive control. And this is kind of what Hand in Hand is like. So Hand in Hand is a really interesting deck. You kind of have a little bit of everything. You have Beatdown, you have GT, you have Discard. So let's take a quick look. You have Dark Confidant for the value. You have Hand of Cruelty, which is kind of what the deck is named after, Hand in Hand. You have Hand of Cruelty, and I think at one point it might have played Hand of Honor. So they're both very cool samurais, kind of like the old school Black and White Knight and Silver Knight, but except samurai. You have Paladin and Vec, so you can kind of see the idea is you have these kind of efficient beaters with protection, so they're kind of hard to mess with. And then you have Ravenous Rats, Shrieking Grotesque. Both of these, well, this one's a good beater. You also force a discard. Ravenous Rats does the same thing. It's not that great of a beater. You have Ghost Council of Orzhov, which ETBs is a very difficult, I don't know, win con, kind of very difficult to deal with because you can sack a creature, exile, it comes back, just hard to deal with. You have Teysa, and then Okiba Gang Shinobi, so another thing for the discard, and you can imagine you play a Ravenous Rats, enter combat, they can't block, you bring in Okiba Gang Shinobi, force double discard, replay Ravenous Rats or your Shrieking Grotesque and control them that way. You also have a Castigate, so just kind of your kind of classic discard effect, very simple. Mortify is your removal, and then Umezawa's Jite. So once you kind of put a Jite on one of your knights or samurais, you just kind of start controlling the board that way from combat and also just from a Jite. You have Mortify to remove them, but then also you're ripping their hand apart with your rats and also your castigates and all that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of deck I wanted to recreate in cEDH, Hand in Hand. So jumping over to my Moxfield link for Hand in Hand, basically what we want to do is we want to focus on discard. We also want to focus on equipment, and I would like to get the samurais in, or kind of those efficient beaters, but we might not have that, so less important. But I think the discard and the equipment and the beats and the control is very important. So I actually built this list a while ago for the 99. There's an early episode of a test brew or something like that, where you can see me play that deck. It was a little earlier, so it was not quite as good. It had a lot more samurais and knights in there. But after my experience playing MLC, I think I've just been a much better Stax player. But also Croxa has kind of taught me how important and how powerful and underexplored discard effects are in cEDH, especially right now. because if you think I want to talk about this. So I think discards are like very very underexplored and very strong in cEDH right now, because one of the kind of primary strategies that people worry about is Storm, and Storm sometimes kind of mulligans very greedy. The hand has to be really perfect, and even a simple Thoughtseize, even a simple turn 1 Kroxa will actually take them off a turn. And that's pretty critical, because if you're playing a Stax deck, I think the ability, or like it's very important for you to create a tempo where you start putting roadblock after roadblock and kind of develop like a layered approach to your stacks, where your opponents are increasingly kind of more cornered and kind of struggle to win through your multiple layers of different types of stacks. Yeah, so think of it like discard is another axis that you can start attacking your opponents at. I think discard is just much better now because a lot of the game has moved on to the mulligan phase. Of course, there's like grindy decks and mid-range decks and that kind of stuff, but like your opening hand is so important right now, and it's kind of like so tight because there's just so many good cards that sometimes like a timely turn 1 discard kind of ruins like a lot of game plans, especially if your opponent's mull low. So I think discard is just like very very strong, and like people don't really kind of think about it as often. And playing Kroxa, I think there's a lot of really great effects, like a bottomless pit. I really like just on your upkeep forcing your opponents to discard a card. We're playing a deck that has no combos. It's all combat, so it doesn't really matter what we discard. It matters what your opponents discard, forcing them to discard a combo piece or ritual or some sort of like something that they're going to use to chain into their win. That's going to set them back really far. So I think Bottomless Pit is great. Necrogen Mist is also another really great effect that just forces your opponent or each player to discard a card on upkeep. And I'm going to talk about why this kind of effect is really important, even though we just talked about why discard is useful, why it's especially important in this deck and how it layers into everything. What else? Oppression is good. Oppression just makes them kind of discard while they play a card, so that just reduces their available resources every time they play a spell. And for you, it doesn't matter. Like, again, this deck, let's say it's just not that good, right? Like, let's say this is the bad deck. It doesn't matter our card quality, what we're discarding, because as long as we put down the relevant piece, it doesn't matter if we have to discard a card, and we have ways to get around it as well. So just useful. Rest in peace. I'm going to talk about the other Stax pieces later. So there's a heavy discard theme, so we want to leverage Waste Not. Waste Not is extremely strong. We also have a Liliana the Veil, actually. So Lily just, forcing another round of discards, and if you have a Waste Not, you're getting all this value. And also there's of course there's a Turgid. Turgid is just very powerful as a creature, and just also you can see all these different discard effects. You can't even control like what they're discarding at random, like with an oppression. So with a Turgid, you can just see how powerful that is already. And what else? So also Okiba Gang Shinobi, I think it's a little expensive trying this out, but I think it's useful because no one's gonna expect it, and once you connect with the Okiba Gang Shinobi, they discard 2, and that's massive. If you hit a Storm player or someone who's playing a linear combo deck, that could just like not end the game, but like really set them back because they have to discard 2 cards. Yeah, so that's the discard effect, and we have some cards that we can like get around or like leverage the discards even on ourselves. So like we have Animate Dead, Necromancy, Reanimate, your kind of classic Reanimator abilities to leverage the discard. But let's talk about how this layers into a Stax plan. So kind of like with all Stax decks right now, we have Rule of Law. We have Deafening Silence. Oh, it should be in here. Yeah, right here, Deafening Silence. We also have Archon of Emeria, Aidon of the Rhetoric. So, although Aether Sworn Canonist, all these creatures that's limiting the amount of spell casting, even for yourself. But now let's start looking at some other effects we have. How do we go asymmetrical on our own Rule of Law? Well, we just don't cast spells, right? Now we have upkeep effects. So even though we're only able to play 1 spell, if we can play permanents that can increase the amount of things that's happening on our end, it doesn't matter if we can only play 1 spell. That's how we leverage. That's how we kind of like really use the Rule of Law. When we start stacking like Liliana, upkeep triggers, and then I'll show you other things as well with the rule of law, then you can see how powerful that starts to get. You can kind of set up an engine because you can only need, you don't even need to play spells at this point. If you can set up an engine that doesn't require playing spells, the rule of law doesn't affect you at all. And oh, I totally forgot to talk about who the commander is. We have Tymna Ardenn. So kind of staying Orzhov. Tymna, of course, lets you draw cards, and Ardenn is kind of playing into our equipment theme. So let's talk about the equipment theme, actually, because it's a good time to transition into it. So how does equipment layer into the strategy? Well, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, the rule of law and the discard effects. The artifact or the equipment effects also kind of like layers into this whole idea of like, we don't need to cast spells anymore. We're drawing cards off of combat damage, and now we're also going to be doing things with our equipment. So let's take a look at our equipment suite real quick. Argentum armor is extremely powerful. That's just our permanent removal. You just blow up anything you want. We also equip 6. Well, doesn't matter, because you can play a Stoneforge Mystic, put it in the battlefield, and then use Ardenn and equip it for free. I think Argentum armor is very powerful. Delver's Torch is interesting, so we might be wondering why Delver's Torch is used for, why even venturing is like kind of viable here. So Delver's Torch and also Nadar in this deck is just another way for us to get more abilities, more advantage without even casting spells, because Venture is a combat, or at least here, they're on combat, so we're not spending any mana aside from the equip or whatever. Like if we get a Delver's Torch or a Nadar on the battlefield and start attacking, we just start getting stuff for free. We're in most cases, I actually like to go through the dungeon that gets us a 4/4. It's the fastest one, pumps with Nadar faster. The other two takes a little too long for me, but it might be useful. Like you can get a treasure in 2 turns, get another blocker in 2 turns. Like there's a lot of abilities. So basically the idea is, here's another way for us to gain value and advantage without casting spells, without spending mana. That's why I like Delver's Torch and also Nadar. Like they're both very powerful. To see what else. Mask of Memory is our way to draw more cards. Skull Clamp, oh man. If you play Skull Clamp with Ardenn, you just kill dorks and draw 2. Ardenn targets auras and equipment on any target permanent or player. So you play a Skull Clamp, you can clamp someone else's dork and you draw 2. Yeah, okay, this deck's got some legs now, right? And then we have Sword of Feast and Famine. So Sword and Feast and Famine, I think, just kind of gives you more mana. We all know what it does, but it also plays in a discard like well. Fire and Ice draws you a card, kills dorks, kills useful things, deals 2 damage. Hearth and Home is extremely powerful. My god. I think this card might be kind of like underrated. I don't know, but basically Hearth and Home blinks a creature and ramps you with a basic land. So we play Armageddon, like, whatever, it's a Stax deck. You put down some stacks like a Trinisphere Armageddon, and you have a Sword of Hearth and Home, you're good. You ramp every single turn. They don't get to play spells. Eventually you break out of it. But the blink is what is extremely powerful here. So something that Charles showed me while we played in the LGS together is he played a Stoneforge Mystic, grabbed a Hearth and Home, equip Stoneforge Mystic, attack Stoneforge Mystic, ramp, blink Stoneforge Mystic, find GT. And this happens every single time you connect. So every single turn you connect with a Hearth and Home, you get more swords and you get more things. You can even get that Skull Clamp trick and start doing that. And Ardenn is reducing the cost of you paying the equip, because it's equipping for free. So Hearth and Home with Stoneforge Mystic and just other things is extremely powerful, I think. And also another time to show another piece of tech, Sin Collector. So Sin Collector is here to rip ad nauseam, PETA, like anything we want. It takes, when ETBs, you choose target opponent and they reveal their hand, and then you pick an instant or sorcery and exile it forever. No more breach, no more nothing, just gone forever. If you set down a Sin Collector and a Hearth and Home, good luck, Storm. We'll see how that goes. Do I have anything else that really leverages that? Not really. Yeah. Truth and Justice, I think, is very useful. It just makes your creatures really big. The +1/+1, the proliferate, I think, is very undervalued. Like this deck has no combos. It's all beats. So once you set up a good engine and start like disrupting people's hands and disrupting what they can play, you need to start closing the game faster, and something like Truth and Justice actually helps you close the game much faster than like any of the other swords. So I think it's pretty useful here. Jite is board control. There's also gain life and also pumps your creature. The gain life might be useful later, I'm going to talk about in a sec, but the board control is extremely important because once you put a Jite onto an Ardenn or a Tymna, you just start controlling the board, and I think that's extremely powerful. So that's kind of the equipment package. Yes, and let's talk about something else that's really interesting in this deck. I think this deck is just really fun to play and also very interesting. So there's you might notice earlier, I'm playing Always Watching. So you're wondering, Rebel, why are you playing Always Watching? It's a 3-mana enchantment that gets +1/+1 and Vigilance to all your creatures. Why is that useful? It's useful because when we start playing this deck and we're relying on beats, I think oftentimes when you're playing a Stax deck, you identify that once you commit to combat, you can't block very well, and that's when the table can turn on you and kind of kill you. So if we have a sword on a creature, or just like whatever we want, Always Watching makes sure that it's harder for them to connect and lets us attack easier. Our Tymna is bigger than everyone else's Tymna. Our creatures are in general bigger than everyone else's creatures. So, and also we can block, so we can freely attack, freely commit to like the damage, like damage on opponent triggers, and also then block and kind of stay in the game that way and not get pressured on life total. So Always Watching has been surprisingly like more useful than I expected. If you can even get something like a Thalia, is there no Thalia in this deck? That's a mistake. There should be a Thalia. If you can get like a first strike creature or something like that with Always Watching, like good luck trying to connect on us. That's not happening. And also that protects our Liliana the Veil and also protects us on another very interesting card. So we have a Court of Grace. Court of Grace is another kind of value engine, putting the Monarch on yourself with Always Watching or just like good blockers means that you're always going to draw cards and you're going to start making 4/4s on every upkeep of yours. And 4/4s are important because they just kill Chroms. If you can snap a sword onto that angel, like it's going to be pretty good. So Court of Grace has been extremely powerful in this deck as well. But you can kind of start seeing how this deck plays together. It's basically like a mid-range deck, but it kind of works to control your opponents very well. There's also a Hypnotic Spectre. You might be wondering why Hypnotic Spectre is worthwhile. The discard on random is very important, I think, very powerful, and also that's why we play a Dark Ritual. You can turn one Dark into a Hypnotic Spectre, then you hit the Storm player. Good luck trying to storm through that. We also have Kunoros. Connects, has lifelink. Creature cards can't enter the creature cards in graveyard can't enter the battlefield, and you can't play spells from graveyard. This is just your anti-breach like graveyard tech. It kind of hoses yourself a little bit, but not that important. As long as you can put a sword on the doggies, you're good. And then what else? Let's talk about. Raydane is a good Stax creature over here, a flyer, very relevant. Also, the other side is very useful. The other side is Valkmira, which just protects your stuff. So if one's able to Trinisphere or they're low on mana, it makes it increasingly difficult to break your kind of like your board. Seer Ascendant, just a beater, and also life gain. And you're probably wondering why there's a little bit of life gain across the board. Well, because we have Archangel Thune. Archangel Thune is just is a modern all-star in Soul Sisters, but we're gonna play it here as well because not only is Archangel Thune a 3/4 flyer lifelink, it just pumps everything. It pumps off of your Tymna like combat damage, and then if you have a Umezawa's Jite, if someone wants to mess with you or like you enter combat and they forget, you gain life twice, pump everything +2/+2, and your sword of like Truth and Justice just proliferate all those +1/+1 counters. Like, yeah, I'm down to play that game. And also, of course, you have Elish Norn, and then another useful. I know this might. I think some people are gonna be like, "What, Breena? Why are you playing Breena?" Breena's really good, and I think Charles explained this very well. This is like a very Charles deck, or you can see the impact of Charles in my deck building now. Mono white guy. Breena is really good because even though your opponents get to draw cards, it really makes them. Like, I think the reason why it's good. Let's talk about its effect real quick. Breena is a 3-mana flying 1/3 that's kind of like people would describe as a worse Tymna. But the important part, because we're playing for combat, we're actually like trying to kill people with combat. The every time a player attacks one of my opponents, if that opponent has more life than an other opponent, that player draws a card, and you put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. So it procs for ourselves. We hit an opponent with them like more life than someone else. We suddenly put 2+1/+1 counters on something, and don't forget we have truth and justice, and also just you can just slap it on like an Archon of Emeria or whatever, and just slap it on like whatever creatures. It actually matters. Like every single time this procs, it makes our creatures bigger. And what's interesting is, all right, so now you're thinking, well, that's great and all, but doesn't that let your opponents draw cards? Yes, it does. But think about it this way. We have like a rule of law, we have rule of law effects, we have Stax effects. It doesn't matter what cards they're drawing. Like, they might hit the Cyclift. Once they Cyclift, it's much more difficult. There are ways around it, but once they hit the Cyclift, it's bad, right? But that's one card out of everything. You're basically making your opponents think about, like, do I really want that draw? And if they're greedy, they'll do it. In their mind, they'll be like, oh, I have to hit that Cyclift. I have to dig myself out of this Stax board and get my Mystical Tutor into my Cyclift or my Culling Ritual or whatever. Every time they don't hit it, though, you're getting +2/+2 counters. And, like, think about a whole pod where everyone's greedy. That's like +8/+8 in a single cycle on a creature. You'll kill someone like really fast. So I think Breena in general, the people don't like it because people just don't like letting other people draw. Like, that's a heuristic, right? Letting your opponents draw is bad. But just think about how their card quality, like, how do I describe this? Think about how much our game plan impacts how little they can do. Like, you can draw 3 cards. The likelihood of you hitting something that like really breaks you out of that game and win it on the same turn is extremely low, because we have rule of law effects. We have like a bunch of different Stax effects, and we also have effects that's forcing you to discard like at random, or discard or like on each cycle. So it actually doesn't really matter that much if you're digging or not, and we kind of want you to try and dig because that makes our deck stronger. It actually makes our board better at no mana investment. We just play Breena, and if you want to try and go for it, go ahead. We'll get bigger and we'll kill you faster. So that's why Breena's really good. I think Breena's like perfect for this deck. But yeah, is there anything else I need to talk about in this deck? Oh, you might be wondering why Thoughtseize. Just sometimes I think it's important if there's a Storm player and your hands can support it or whatever. Like, sometimes the turn 1 Thoughtseize is enough to knock that player out from winning like immediately and give the pod time to deal with stuff. So I think that's why it's useful. I think something else that's interesting to talk about is the lack of instants in this deck. We have a Dark Ritual and a Vamp Tutor. Probably want a silence effect. We have a Ranger Captain here somewhere, but you might want a silence. But I think the reason why there's no instants or less instants, you can play a Swords or whatever, Path to Exile, or Prismatic Ending if you want to. But the idea is that there's low instant or sorcery counts because we're kind of playing sorcery speed here. We do want to build our board and like kind of develop that and win that way. So that's why there's kind of a low spell count. I think there really should be a Thalia here, but we're also trying to kind of attack that kind of thing. So yeah. Oh, another thing to talk about, Static Orb. This Static Orb plays into the whole always watching effect. If you have always watching out in a Static Orb, doesn't matter if you're tapping 2 lands, all your creatures have Vigilance, you'll pressure them, and kind of really take advantage of that. So the rest of the deck is just kind of like Stax pieces. We have Grafdigger's Cage, we have Rest in Peace, and what else? We have Tokatlik, Honor Guard, and I don't know. Oh, Dranith Magistry. I think Dranith is important. Dothi Voidwalker is useful in general, just because you can just take whatever you want. It's just strong. Also, Shadow means that you can connect easier, put a sword on them, and put your Breena counters on them, becomes a 5/5. Imagine if everyone's greedy, you put like 8 counters on this guy. It's an 11-10. You'll kill someone. Like, one hit from this, like, takes out that ad nos plan. Like I don't know how to prove to you guys this is like very powerful. But yeah, the Stax package is kind of flexible. It's whatever you think is useful. You can probably cut Sin Collector and a bunch of other things, probably Okiba Gang if you want to kind of tune the Stax to fight your meta. Linvala is really good, just in general. Another flyer, another beater, another Stax creature. But yeah, you can tune the deck as you want to, but as long as you understand the core of what we're trying to do here, this has been extremely fun to play. I really enjoy this deck, and I'll be playing it more. I think I'm actually gonna collect this deck. So what else? Is there anything else we need to cover here? No, not really. There's like Inventor's Fair. I guess we can also talk about why Blind Obedience is useful in general. Blind Obedience just taps all the treasures, so Dockside can't win on the same turn or whatever. Tap down a creature so your things connect easier. Just very relevant. Aura of Silence is very powerful. If you've watched me play Time, you'll see that one pivotal game where the Aura of Silence literally stopped everyone almost. Just very powerful. Again, you get turn 1 to Aura of Silence. It's gonna make things difficult for players who depend on artifacts. So kind of a lot of players. Let's see if there's anything else that's useful in my considering board. Not really. Yeah, I think you could play more tax effects if you want to. I kind of like the idea of Throat Slitter, but it's like a little too cute. Pure Steel Paladin. We're not playing that many equipment. Like, I think at most I play like 3 equipment, so there's a 2 mana card to draw you 3 cards. It's like very meh. I actually like Knight of the White Orchid. I think it's a good way to ramp if you get a Sword of Hearth and Home. You know, another way to ramp. Also, First Strike is relevant. I used to play a standard deck that was an always watching deck with this, and also Ojutai, and a bunch of other creatures with First Strike. And the idea is that you have a bunch of creatures that attack really well and block extremely well as well. So that's kind of the idea. A bunch of Knights here. You probably don't want to play it. Halvar is interesting, but kind of like a little win more, I think. Yeah, I think this pretty much covers the deck. So I'll end it here. I hope this was interesting to listen to. Even if you're not interested in playing this deck, I enjoy a lot. But I hope you got to learn a little bit about kind of like some theories I've been thinking about for discard and stacks and playing like beats and like, I don't know if this is mid-range, but leveraging combat step and other types of value to play cEDH. I think sometimes we focus a lot on some heuristics that's like only you have to rely on being able to play a lot of spells and draw a lot of cards, and that's the main type of advantage we want to have. But there's a lot of other things we can consider, especially about these rule of law effects. This deck does exceptionally well against Stax pots. That's kind of why I brought it back out again, because my LGS is all playing Stax decks, and usually the joke is you bring out a casual deck to stomp Stax decks, and this is kind of like that. But this is also good against like combo decks. I don't think it's as great against mid-range decks unless you get like a GTA Fast or something like that. Then you can kind of control the board that way. But very interesting deck, very interesting theories I think that went into it, and a lot of like different strategies kind of coming together in a really nice way. So I really like this deck, as I've said many times already. I think when you play this deck, what would make you really successful is kind of being really efficient with each of your actions. Where kind of like a lot of combat based decks or stacks decks, we don't have the luxury of playing at instant speed. You're not able to play reactively as well. You have to be proactive. You have to think not 2 steps ahead, but you have to think of a good game plan and think about like, all right, my pod has XYZ. I have an Imp Seal and a Vamp Tutor, or like an Imp Seal. What is the stack piece I need to like stop the most amount of people? And also kind of making good decisions on your combat. I think stuff like Hypnotic Spectre, or like other ways to discard and stuff like that, or like your Sword of Feast and Famine. Kind of thinking about like leveraging the pod to your advantage, because I think it's something that low color players, especially white, mono white, or like stacks players know really well, is you don't have good interaction. You don't have like that many answers, or like you're not like a Thrasios whatever deck, like a 4-color deck with all the answers, all the counter spells. Well, how do we make them do the rest of the work for us? we put down a rule of law, they're probably going to want to get rid of it, but you might want to position it where one opponent we know like is going to do well under the rule of law, and instead of forcing the hypnotic specter onto the person who's already kind of hosed by the rule of law, you force a hypnotic specter onto the person who's doing well, so that the person with the like kind of damaged by the rule of law is forced to interact for you to answer some of the things that you can't do as well. So kind of thinking about stuff like that will make piloting this deck really easy, and also makes it very interesting. But yeah, I hope you learned something. Hope you've got inspired, and this might be interesting to you. I'm gonna play this more, and thanks for listening or watching. Goodbye.